Democracy is defined as a form of government in which people choose leaders by voting. We set out to ask the question of what is democracy, as well as questions about citizenship to a few students and guests of Kent State University.
Here is what we got. Question 1. Where is the origin of democracy from?
What is the origin of democracy from?
I don't really know. I'm going to guess with the Greeks.
Well, as I understand it, there have been many sort of suggestions put forward. Most place the origins of democracy in ancient Greece, sort of an Athenian Republican tradition that was revitalized in the United Provinces in the Netherlands and then in the United States post-revolution.
I think the origin of organized democracy is ancient Rome.
Greek.
I think the concept of democracy, as we know it as Americans, really gets its roots from the ancient Greeks. And America is unique in the fact that we don't have a pure democracy. We have a federalist democratic republic. We have a representative democracy. So we've taken kind of pieces and parts from other governments, but I think the main inspiration that we have is from the ancient Greek model.
Question 2. What is democracy to you?
I'm going to say it has to do with the people deciding what to vote for, right?
Democracy is the collective ability of the people, however you define the people, to control the circumstances in which they live. Whether that's the government, the economy, social structures, etc.
Democracy to me is very similar to that. Representative leadership for a larger population.
Everyone gets a chance to vote, everyone is able to get their say.
I feel like its original purpose was to, take a major population, but take sample members out of that population and actually represent their voice in a collective setting. So more intimate, so people can actually communicate their ideas because they tend to get lost.
Democracy to me is the epitome of being an American, the epitome of freedom of expression, and getting out there and really voicing your opinion through the ballot box and affecting change that you want to see happen. I think voting is the most important thing that you can do to really exercise your civic duty.
Question 3. What is your source for news, and do you feel like you're an informed citizen?
Social media for sure, especially Facebook. You just know everything around Facebook.
Of course.
And then I'd say I'm pretty informed.
Source for news. I use a lot of social media, specific sources. I'm big on Democracy Now! Obviously, you need to take places like CNN, MSNBC, etc. with a grain of salt. I'm a big fan of Jacobin Magazine. It's sort of a left-wing magazine out of New York. You should subscribe to it. But I like to consider myself informed, yeah.
My source of news is MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News.
Okay.
I feel as though I'm a moderately informed citizen.
Yeah, that's been my boyfriend. He's been my source of news, but he gets that from CNN, so I feel like we're informed about the things that are the most important, I feel like, but we're not given the full story. I think that makes sense.
My source for news is social media.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome because everything's at my fingertips now, especially with my cell phone. So I try to make it a point to follow actual pages, my interests. I follow a lot of national parks and
Okay.
I follow Bernie Sanders on Twitter and stuff like that. So just so I'm always constantly being flooded with the actual good vibrations or just with actual consciousness of awareness of our generation and the world around us.
I feel like I'm a very informed citizen, as egotistical as that may sound. I like to read I like to read the news a lot. I don't like cable news. I don't like Fox or MSNBC or CNN. I don't like pundits telling me what to think. I like to look at a certain set of facts and make a determination or an opinion on my own. So I read the news from third-party sources that don't have a specific agenda.
Question 4. Do you believe age or race may affect a group's inclination to vote?
I don't really think anybody's less inclined to vote as long as they get the opportunity to at some point in time. And I guess it depends on the matter that they're voting on. Maybe if it were a more mature matter, then sure, it would be leaning towards the more mature age group. But then I don't really see that there's any limits necessary.
Certainly, yeah. If you look at the demographics, people of different ages, of different racial and ethnic groups, as well as all sorts of different demographic identifiers will correlate differently with likelihood to vote. As to why I think that happens, it varies quite a bit depending on what group you're talking about and the era in which it's happening.
I think that there are some populations of people who are either disenfranchised or feel that the government does not represent their beliefs or values, and that would discourage them to vote. And I think that there are some subgroups of people who are overrepresented who feel much more inclined or comfortable to vote because their values and beliefs are much more representative and salient.
It does, because most of the times when you live in inner cities, a lot of people who are in inner cities are those people who are black or have a lower socioeconomic status. They don't have a car to get to the voting places, so like that obviously is going to make it difficult for them right off the bat.
Yeah.
So it's just, I feel like there's definitely an issue there, so that needs to be addressed.
Yes. Because we're all from different like populations, so like within those populations there's like communities and like I don't know, it gets even more smaller. So like there's like more than like I don't know, just a broad view of like what we get. Everybody's opinions aren't considered all the time because everybody has different experiences.
I think there's several factors that determine whether or not certain demographics turn out to vote. I think with young people, age is definitely an issue. I think people are just too caught up in other things, and they're not energized to go out and vote. They don't think, other elections besides the presidential one are sexy. And so I think people feel cynical and they feel apathetic about the electoral process. And so that's why millennials don't go out and vote. And then with minorities, I think a lot of minorities are disenfranchised by the rhetoric they hear from certain politicians or from people from certain sides of the aisle. And also the unfortunate thing is you have certain legislatures in this country passing legislation making it harder for minority groups to vote. So of course that's going to affect things that happen.
And finally, the last question. Question 5. Are you a registered voter?
I am, and I guess I am because I decided to renew my license, so I was like, sure, I'll vote, but I don't know, I didn't get to vote yet, so I guess I will when the time comes.
Yes, I'm registered to vote. I don't think that voting is the sort of all-curing silver bullet civic panacea that a lot of people seem to think it is, that democracy begins and ends with voting, but it's a way to incrementally have some sort of effect on the larger social structures of our society, like I said. Particularly, we just had our sort of like off-season elections, and there was a lot going on in town, specifically actually relevant to what you guys are talking about. In Kent, there was a Democracy Day, Municipal Issue 43. What that did was it established a Democracy Day within a given range every year in the city of Kent to have a town meeting in which citizens would come together to discuss the effect of money and politics, and then have sort of minutes from that meeting sent to the state legislature to discuss, and I think also Congress as well. But yeah, these are the kind of cool things you do when you vote.
I am registered to vote. I have worked on a political campaign in Washington, D.C., so I felt pretty connected to the system. I feel as though my beliefs are represented by a political party, and I feel passionately about working for that cause.
Yes, I am a registered voter, but I haven't given the chance to vote because there's no place around here where they tell me where to vote. It's important. Like, we have a say, even if it's by 1 vote or 20 votes, you have a say.
I am a registered voter because it's my duty to be an active citizen in the world, and I just feel like with my heritage, it's also like pretty stupid not for me to like people literally died or like I don't know, like John Lewis, like during like the whole voting thing, he like was tweeting about like how he like got like 40 skull fractures and like he was arrested like over 40 times or some shit like that, and like that was just like a really big like statistic to me because like that was like wow, like people were actually down here like dying, and like it's fine.
I am a registered voter. I voted in my first election, this one in November that took place just a few weeks ago, and I registered to vote because I think it's important to exercise your civic duty, and I want to engage in the political process, and I want to critique certain policies, and I don't feel like I would have the right to do that if I didn't go out and actually vote for specific policies. And the next election that I plan to vote in is the Ohio Democratic primary in March, and I plan to vote for Bernie Sanders.
In conclusion, amongst the small group of people we interviewed, we found out that there are multiple different definitions of citizenship and democracy. These can stem from where they're from, their race, and their socioeconomic background. But in the end, it's a self-defined trait. So, what does democracy mean to you?